Go away, John. Go away. You won't get anything. The seller of a small rural shop leaned on both hands on a mop and breathed heavily. And don't trample all over my floor. Can't you see how much dirt you brought in? I'm already washing the floors, and I'm closing up now. Meg, what are you making a fuss about? An already older man in wet, dirty clothes and with long tangled hair poured a handful of change onto the counter. That's just enough for a bottle here. Give it to me. I don't need anything else. Have you heard of the law? I can't sell alcohol at night. Meg didn't give in. But there are still 7 minutes of allowed time. John pointed to the clock on the wall with his eyes. Oh, John. Meg suddenly gave up. You're putting me in a tight spot. Well, okay. She quickly counted the change and snorted, reaching for the bottle. Where'd you get the money? Did you find a stash or something? No, shrugged John. Kind people gave it to me. They had a wheel puncture on the road today and I helped them, so they thanked me. Ah, said Meg, and I thought you were begging near the church. Look how dirty and sticky your change is. Money is money, John said indifferently, taking his purchase and leaving the store. Oh, you rascal, grumbled Meg, wiping the floor behind him. You brought so much dirt in, and it's not even too lazy for you to run for a bottle of whiskey in such bad weather. Although, probably, it's terribly cold in his hunter's house. Well, let him drink and warm up. Meg was right. John was a real homeless person and had been living in an abandoned hunter's house for several years. Equipping a couch out of an old sofa he had dragged from the dump, a wooden crate covered with a piece of tattered, checkered tarpaulin served as his table. John had no other place to live, nor did he want anything else. Often the man could be seen on the bridge. He often stood in one place for a long time and watched as the river lazily carried its waves away from him. At such times his memories clouded his gaze, which he could not get rid of. And now, without paying attention to the rain, wind, or late hour, he came to his place and stood, exposing his face to the cold rain, and warm tears flowing from under his closed eyelids, mixed with rain streams, and flowed down, falling into the river. It was such weather then, too, whispered John, and suddenly, loudly, hoarsely sobbed, Forgive me, forgive me. I'm so guilty, Lord. Forgive me for everything. Suddenly, through the noise of the downpour, John heard the sound of an approaching car and screeching brakes, and the grey curtain of rain was torn apart by headlights. The car spun on the road, and as it inevitably approached the bridge, it rushed straight at John. Joy flashed in his eyes. Finally! He managed to think, and even spread his arms, meeting the thundering heap of metal, but at the last moment the car swerved again and hit the metal railing 3 meters away from John and hung over the river. John oriented himself instantly, jumped to the driver's door and carefully opened it. Almost immediately a young woman with a large belly fell into his arms. She was clearly in labour. Help! Help! She moaned. Are you alone? Is anyone else in the car? Alone, said the stranger, but John, having dragged her to a safe distance, still returned to the car and carefully examined it. Indeed, there was no one else there, so John immediately returned to the woman. She screamed sharply and grabbed his hand with one hand and her own stomach with the other. You're in labour, said the astonished John. Why am I so unlucky? The bag, in the car, for delivery, the woman started, but then cut herself off and screamed in pain. John hurried to the car and found the bag the woman had mentioned lying on the floor. When he tried to pick it up, the car rocked and he had to jump aside to avoid injury. He attempted to take the bag through another door, but it wouldn't open. Meanwhile, the woman continued to shout and scream. John decided to return to her and help her instead. He lifted her up, hugged her around the waist, and led her to his abandoned hunter's house. Suddenly they heard a terrible crash behind them. Your car has dived, John told the woman. Good thing you're safe." They walked a little further, but the woman stumbled and almost fell. "I can't do it any more," she cried. "Call the doctors. Help me." "The doctors won't make it in time," John told her. "Just hold on a little longer, we're almost there." Within a couple of minutes he had laid her on his bed, taken out an old kerosene lamp he sometimes used and lit the wick. He then uncorked a bottle of whiskey and poured it generously on his hands before treating the folding knife he had taken out of his pocket. The woman, when the pain subsided, watched him but didn't understand what he was doing. Without further ado, John approached her and tried to smile gently. "Don't be afraid. I've done this many times." He unbuttoned her shirt and took it off, then ripped her skirt in two. "What are you doing?" the woman gasped in another wave of pain. "You're going to give birth to a baby right now. What's your name?" "Zoe." "Well, hang in there, Zoe. It's already started." "I'm having twins." "Yeah, I've already figured that out by the size of your belly." John stroked the woman's knee gently. Well, calm down. Let's catch a contraction. There, good job." John delivered the first child skillfully, cut the umbilical cord, and hearing the baby cry, quickly wrapped him in his mother's shirt. He then handed him to Zoe. "Hold your firstborn. Press him skin to skin. Just cover him with the shirt on top. Sorry, I have nowhere to put him. And rest a little. In 10 minutes we'll continue." Through the veil of pain, Zoe looked at her unexpected saviour and didn't understand how this strange man knew how to deliver babies. John treated his hands again and turned to her. "Well, let's continue." Zoe nodded, but the second baby didn't cry to announce his birth, and John leaned over him anxiously. Seconds felt like hours, and Zoe couldn't bring herself to ask what happened to her son. She was suffocating with fear, holding her trembling firstborn to her chest, and at that moment she heard a light slap and the cry of the second child. "Your little boy almost suffocated," John said, wrapping him in the torn skirt and also handing him to his mother. "Well, now everything will be fine with him. And now let's finish the delivery process and everything will be fine with you." Tears streamed down Zoe's cheeks, and she couldn't calm down. John efficiently leaned over her and covered her with his jacket. "You rest now and I'll get some help. Don't be afraid, everything will be fine." Zoe was left alone with her babies. She could hear their hearts beating, and now she cried softly, realizing how terrible her situation was. John rushed to the village and knocked on all the gates, shouting, "Help! Call an ambulance!" The curtains stirred behind the windows, but no one rushed to help him. "What's wrong with you people?" said John. Finally, a woman from the farthest house looked out and invited him in. "Just be quiet, please. My child is sick. He's sleeping. Don't wake him up. I'll bring the phone now." A minute later, they called an ambulance, and John explained how to get to the woman in labour. John breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Thank God. Thank you, and sorry for the trouble." He had already reached the gate when the woman caught up with him and handed him her jacket, saying, "Here, please take it. It's my late husband's. And here are some pies. I baked them today." John wanted to refuse, but it was clear that the woman was offering him everything from the bottom of her heart. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marcia, and you?" "I'm John. Well, excuse me again, Marcia. Sorry for the trouble. I have to go. I still have to meet the ambulance." "Yes, of course." She nodded and waved her hand. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes, and they took Zoe and her babies with them. She barely had time to thank John for his help, but he just shrugged and said, "Take care, and don't drive in that condition again." "I was due in 3 weeks," Zoe weakly smiled. "Oh, 39 to 40 weeks is normal for a single pregnancy," John explained. "And if it's twins, then you need to be prepared by the 36th or 37th week." "Look at him," one paramedic nodded to another. "He looks like a bum, but talks like a gynecologist." "Hey, Did you happen to graduate from medical school?" "How could I?" John smiled. "You yourself say that I'm just a bum. They don't take people like me as cosmonauts or doctors." The ambulance left and John returned to his own place. He collected and threw away Zoe's torn clothes and then sat on the couch for a long time, staring at one spot and listening to the wind and rain raging outside. It was the same weather that day, John thought again, but his thoughts suddenly left the distant past, and before his eyes appeared the slender figure of Marcia, the only woman who wasn't afraid to open the door to him. "She's brave," he said out loud, "and kind. Just unlucky. No husband, sick son, or woman." And it was very strange, a poor homeless person sitting in a cold, uninhabited room and wrapped in a wet coat, to escape the piercing cold, pitied not himself but another person, and he pitied her sincerely and from the heart. John fell asleep only in the morning, not forgetting to eat Marcia's pastries, and he dreamt not of painful dreams, to which he had become accustomed, but of something kind, warm, and very bright, something he so lacked in his life. Zoe, under the observation of doctors, calmed down when they told her that the delivery had gone surprisingly well, and neither the babies nor she were in danger. They asked for a phone and immediately called her husband. He answered with a sleepy voice, and she smiled. "Oh, are you asleep? Well done, my dear hubby, and I have 2 news for you. Firstly, I had a car accident and drowned your new car, and secondly, we have 2 wonderful sons." "Wait, Zoe, I don't understand anything. Have you given birth? But it's still too early for the due date. Why are you calling from an unknown number?" Zoe sighed and started her story. "Did you forget how I asked you to stay? I said that I was afraid. I had a bad feeling, Harvey. I was right. You went to your important meeting and almost lost your whole family. I'm not exaggerating at all, and you'll understand that now." "Where are you now?" he interrupted, her in an anxious voice. "I'm in the hospital. The babies and I are fine. However, I need you to listen to me. When you left, I became very upset. The rain and wind began, and I was completely alone in the house. Helen asked for time off because her mother was sick. Anyway, I decided to take a bath and go to sleep. I was petrified. The wind was howling loudly, and the rain was banging against the windows. Then the lights went out. Maybe it was because of the bad weather, or perhaps a branch broke the wires, I don't know, but I was very scared. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, and I accidentally dropped the phone in the bath. I almost went crazy with fear. I leaned down to get it and then felt terrible pain. Harvey, I asked you not to leave, but you decided that nothing would happen. And it did. I started giving birth alone in the empty, completely dark house. I was petrified and decided to drive myself to the hospital. I took your car because mine was too small. At first everything was fine, but then the contractions became stronger, and several times I almost lost consciousness from the pain right behind the wheel. The wipers couldn't cope with the streams of rain, but I was still driving. And then, on the bridge, I felt really bad, and I was unable to control the car. I was spinning. I wanted to keep the car, but I crashed into the railing. Oh, Harvey, everything that happened was like a terrible dream. I still can't remember without shaking. You know, I woke up and saw a bum. He pulled me out of the car, then took me somewhere. I don't even know how to name it. He lives there. His name is John. So this very John helped me give birth. When I saw a knife in his hand, I got terribly scared. And then he called the ambulance and they took me to the hospital. Harvey was stunned while listening to his wife, and he couldn't believe his ears. Zoe, are you okay now? How are our sons? Everything is fine now, Harvey, and now, sorry, I need to sleep. Yes, rest, please. And Zoe, don't be afraid of anything anymore. I'll be there soon. Oh, Harvey, believe me, after what happened to me, I'm not afraid of anything anymore." In the evening, Harvey was with his wife, apologizing for not listening to her request and leaving her alone. "Are you angry with me about the car?" she asked, happy that everything was over. "What are you talking about?" he shrugged. "The most important thing is that you and our little ones are fine. You know, when I'm discharged from the hospital, let's find John and thank him for his help." "Definitely," Harvey promised. "Just first, I hope you and the babies fully recover so that I can be completely calm about you. By the way, I've already invited a nanny. She'll help you, and you won't get tired. She has experience working with twins. So don't worry, my dear, and forgive me again for what you had to go through." Zoe reached out to her husband and hugged him. "Thank you, Harvey. I love you very much." A month passed. One evening when Harvey returned from work, Zoe greeted him with a delicious dinner and started a conversation that didn't leave her alone. "Harvey, we never thanked that man, John. Tomorrow is a day off. Let's go find him." "With pleasure, my dear. I wanted to suggest this to you." In the morning they searched for John, but he was nowhere to be found. So they stopped at a small shop to buy water and also asked if anyone had heard anything about the strange bum. "Of course I know John," the saleswoman Meg said eagerly when Harvey put a large bill in front of her, which she immediately hid in her pocket. "I knew him and his wife Kira. To be honest, she was a real wretch. Beautiful, but very angry and greedy. She only married John because he was promising. He was a talented gynecologist. Women signed up for him in droves. Kira was happy at first, thinking they would be rolling in money, but he never took money or gifts from his patients. He thought it was wrong. He also didn't want to go to another hospital, even though he was repeatedly offered better jobs and better pay. His wife started nagging him because he was working all day, and they still had a bad life. As for her, she never worked a day, but she pissed him off, and finally she drove him crazy. She made him take extra shifts, so he worked all day and night in the hospital. Once he was returning home late at night after a 24-hour shift. Suddenly he saw an elderly couple hitchhiking and picked them up. It was a terrible night with terrible weather. Rain, wind. Visibility was 0. I don't know what happened, but some said that John fell asleep at the wheel. Others said that he simply lost control and that he and the passengers flew off the bridge and fell into the river. He tried to save his passengers, but he couldn't. He didn't have the strength. There was a trial later and he got a sentence. His wife left him, taking their daughter with her somewhere, and he never saw them again. She sold the apartment and property because John signed everything himself. When he came back, he became homeless. He settled in an old hunter's shed not far from the bridge, and he's not leaving here. That's the story. "So he's a gynecologist," Zoe said. "Then everything is clear." "I was surprised how skillfully and quickly he did everything," she added. "Where can we find him?" Harvey asked, and at that moment the door of the store creaked and John appeared on the threshold. "So here he is," Meg exclaimed. "John, people are asking for you here. They want to thank you for your help." "No need." John nodded to Zoe like an old friend. "How are the boys? Everything's all right?" "Yes," she replied, "and all thanks to you. You know, we named the older one John and the younger one Michael." John smiled. "Nice names. Well, be happy. And you, Meg, sell to me, as usual." He went to the counter, but Harvey stepped up to him, took him by the arm and led him away. Zoe and Meg didn't hear what they were talking about, but later in the car, Harvey told his wife, "He's really a strange person. I offered him money, but he refused. I wanted to help him get a job at the hospital, and he didn't want to. But he did explain where someone named Marcia lived. Her son is sick and John asked to cure him." "And what did you do?" Zoe asked. "Nothing. We'll go to this Marcia now and we'll find out everything. and I'll pay for the boy's treatment and find the best doctors if necessary, even if they're abroad. He saved you and our children, and I'll save Marcia's child for that." Several months passed, and autumn came. John still lived in an abandoned hunter's house, although now it had some conveniences. He didn't know who did it, but now there was a comfortable sofa, a table, a chair, 2 pillows, and a warm quilt in his house, and a stove that could be heated with firewood. However, John guessed that Harvey had brought it all, and in his heart he was grateful to him for this unobtrusive help. One evening, the surprised John heard someone's light footsteps on the gravel, went out to meet an uninvited guest, and saw Marcia and her 7-year-old son. "Marcia, what happened?" he blurted out. "Nothing, John," she replied. "My son and I came to thank you for what you did and invite you to come to us. Harvey told me everything and paid for my son's treatment. Now Tommy is healthy. We just got back from the sanatorium yesterday. First, we were treated at the clinic, and then we recovered there." "I'm glad," said John, looking at the boy. "Let's go home with us," Tommy said. "Mum baked pies. You will live with us, right?" John turned away so that they wouldn't see the tears in his eyes. And when he turned to Marcia and Tommy, they saw that he was smiling warmly and openly at them. Now John knew that someone up there had forgiven him and was giving him another chance at happiness.